Are you there, Amy?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Let's buckle up because I don't have a lot of time today, and we're going to go through a lot of cool things because I know there's a great audience out there that has some good experience. So, most of you know me. I won't go too much into that, but I am Vice President of Industrialized Construction now here at Autodesk. I am still, I always say, wet and dirty from the industry, and I've worked on 6 of the 7 continents. So don't say not in my town to me, and don't save your challenges for the elevator talk. I love to hear them live. So everything has been changing. Why has everything been changing? I think if you fail to recognize it's changing because of convergence, you sort of miss the boat, right? So we already know that technology is converging. I always make a joke. This is my phone. It's also my map. It's my dating app. It's my babysitter. It's my entertainment. It's pretty much everything I do now on my phone because technology has converged, right? We've seen that melding. And we know that process is converging. And so you've heard a lot at Autodesk of people saying design, make. Sometimes we even say design, make, operate. I like to think of it as a paradigm shift, actually, of operate, make, and design. And we were seeing a lot of processes converging around that. We'll talk more about our big serial owners later. But we are seeing industries converging. So many of you are talking about manufacturing, design, and construction. That's why industrialized construction, you know, I call it that now. I used to say modern methods of construction, but the minute it came out of my mouth, it sounded old. I don't want to be old. I'm already 50. So we're talking about industrialized construction as the industry is converging. And what does that mean for you that I think sometimes people fail to recognize is that business models are actually converging and changing. There are new value propositions, new roles, new drivers, new technology that's out there. I'm glad to follow Speckle out there. But everything is happening because of convergence. But change doesn't happen so easily, as we all know. This is Dan Miller's formula for change. For those of you who know me well, I live my life by this formula. Nothing changes first unless you're unhappy. Got to be dissatisfied first in the way things are worked. If you're getting paid to draw a lot of things that are never being built, or you're getting paid to go price some things out to people that'll never actually win your work, and you're happy doing that, you're probably not going to change much. And so that cash for chaos ecosystem has made us a little bit happy with the current state. But you have to be unhappy with that. And then you have to see a vision for what's possible. Hopefully you've seen some of that today, and hopefully I'll show you some more. But then after that, it's not just about seeing a far off future. You have to see some first concrete steps of action that you can take, and all of that has to be greater than resistance. You will have internal and external resistance for change. That's really important. So every time you're thinking about what you learned at this conference today, take two things, two first concrete steps of action, so you can take it to your daily lives. I'm going to play a quick video. Hopefully you guys can hear it. If not, somebody will wave their hands at me. Here we go. Maybe.
What we're doing now, we're beginning to treat, for years we've heard, just design it and we'll figure out how to prefab it. Do whatever you want and we'll figure it out. That doesn't work.
Right.
Because the rules, the data, the information comes in after the design is done, and then it throws us into this monster.
And that's not working.
It's a nightmare.
And like we, one of the things that struck me working in the design field was that there was, especially in like a hard bid process, there's no feedback loop at all.
Right.
Like I'm literally sitting in an office detailing something, without any ability to check with the actual people who make that thing in a meaningful way and collaborate with them around that information. So it's about bringing the making into the design.
I love that.
Versus sort of creating a design and hoping it can be made.
Exactly.
Like it's we have to kind of flip the script, I think.
I love it.
Right? Data, it's all important. And to be able to utilize data and to be able to really gather that data and be able to use it individually in a manner in which we can develop this kit of parts or develop these pieces, these components,
Right.
and be able to design those components, be able to create those components or componentize our business. It makes it much easier to assemble a completed delivery in a kit of parts fashion.
What's the one thing you hear them saying in common? It's about the data. This whole notion of DFMA isn't about design, because as you heard my friend Stan Chu say, and I'll stand behind him as one of the best architects I know, he doesn't have the data for how things are made. And getting just people to the front of the process to use their mouths is not enough, because we have so many iterative processes going on at once. You have to actually codify it in the technology. And so I've come up with this transformation framework because I got tired of people being either, they got very frustrated or they got very excited and they wanted to get somewhere or they didn't know how. And I wanted to make it a little bit easier, thinking about Dan Miller's formula for change. So whatever your outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and I've just picked a couple from some of the companies I work with, there needs to be a strategy for that. Then you don't sprinkle magic pixie dust and it just happens. We all know that. We'd like that to be the case, but that's not true. Before you do anything, you have to assess readiness and your foundational skills, your culture, your tools, your technology stack, and the processes that you do every day. Because you don't get to go from being a duck to an eagle in one fell swoop. You've got to actually build up some skills and understand what exists out there in your current organization to see if you're ready for transformation. And then the second thing you want to do in your first concrete steps of action is productization. It's a verb on purpose. I've been saying prefabrication for so long, my Queen of Prefab name is around it. I'll talk to you about why I think prefabrication is a word we'll no longer use one day, and that the verb is to take prefabrication, productize those things into products, so that we can actually have a mindset for data reusability, both physical reusability, but mostly for the data reusability, so we can then automate things and connect those processes attached to a physical piece part like a panel or a skid or a pod or a module. You've got to productize both the physical and the digital and then automate that and connect it. I just heard somebody say locked in someone's desktop on their laptop. Once you digitize things and automate them, hopefully eliminating some steps and making it better, you do want to be able to share that on the cloud. So lots of, securely, obviously, and put things in the cloud for stakeholders around the world to share. So we need that connection of a platform that's not just about one product. There's no one ring to rule them all. There never will be. It's going to be a platform of lots of products you've heard about today, interacting with a platform. And I came to Autodesk because I believe we have the stack of the platform with lots of partners in the ecosystem, some, again, who you've heard from today. So only then you'll be able to optimize things and really use industrialized construction or things like digital twins or generative design. You won't be able to jump right to that without those first 4 steps. You won't be successful. Many of you have tried. I know some of the guys in the audience, they've tried and they failed. And so have I. That's why I've learned this the hard way with a lot of punches in the face. Because ultimately we want to get to digital and physical reuse, circularity. I want to start judging architects by how many engineers, how many things they never have to draw again, or how many fab shop managers that don't have to come up with a one-off solution ever again. That's where we're going to have transformational change. Because industrialized construction, I like it as the umbrella term. Again, I used to use modern methods, but it's not about modern methods. This is about applying manufacturing techniques to the entirety of the built environment. Every part of it, from conceptualization to operational considerations to design and pre-construction, construction, all that. And they're both technology and process enablers. I don't have much time to get into today, other than I don't say DFMA anymore as design. I only say the word data. Because without data, there is no such thing. We took a manufacturing term and we assumed that it was the designer's responsibility without knowing designers don't actually have the make information. So we got to move the make information up in front of design. And that's through data, not through, again, our mouths, right? And so we need to understand that BIM, the eye becomes more intelligent when you can inform it with actual manufacturing data. And you've already heard me talk about my prefabrication continuum, that the verb becomes productization, which becomes products. So we can, again, enable lots of pieces and parts across the world and advanced building methodologies with the data and how we want to make those things up front in our design process. So many of you have seen the McKinsey report. I'm not going to go too much into this, except that a lot of people didn't read it and they only hear the pieces people talk about, which is that, 45% of what's going on in our space in the next 15 years is going to go to industrialized construction. Well, that's true. I think it's actually been that way in a lot of cases, depending on the application of the building type. But what they didn't read is that in the next 1 to 5 years, 3/4 of the people that did this survey thought it was going to be a product-led approach. We're in year 2. And that 66% believe that industrialization and digitization are going to be the emerging disruptions that have the highest impact. Okay, highest impact, that's great. But product-led, that's something we have not really done enough about. 1 to 5 years. We're seeing that product-based approach as the today industry dynamic and the dynamic of the future that makes the biggest impact, right? How do we get manufacturing-informed design into something that's more dynamic, into dynamic content, so that we can enable the creation of customizable, reusable data, manufacturing data, the make data that architects don't have, for the built environment so that we can do things at scale? Anytime you use your mouth, you can't do it at scale. You have to apply tech to that, right? We've got to be able to apply things like machine learning and AI. And we want to be able to reuse things so that we can, again, digitize them and automate them like you saw in the framework, and get better at them. Every building doesn't have to be different. I don't care what anybody else says. There are plenty of standardized components that can be even shaped and made different capacities. They don't have to be standard like the same every time, but it can actually be reusable and made and utilized so we can manufacture things. But let's talk about how things are done now, right? And what the opportunities are. The problem is that design decisions are just not informed by what can be made. I'll go toe to toe with anybody about that. You can show me some little examples here and there. Somebody did one thing, like Jamie Johnson's my really great friend. He did a Herculean effort and found a bunch of manufacturers to create his platform. But you still had to go find out what that was. You had to figure out how things are made, right? Most architects don't know and don't have access to know every single piece part and how they are made, and they shouldn't have to. That's not why they went to school. That's not what they wanted to do in their core talents. And what do we do after that? We have this iterative process that's very painful and expensive with high risk and uncertainty. I don't care how many different kinds of contracts they are all the same. They're still iterative processes, every single thing. And the opportunities, how do we connect these tools and enable new tools and capabilities so we can actually work at scale? Because we all know that this is in reality a sad, sad story, and it's painful, but this is how it's addressed today, right? You've got architects, they look in their desktop of static data, maybe it's in Revit, they look some space allocation, some placeholder, right? Because they're more worried about the building in its entirety, not, I'm going to use this example of this assembly. Let's pick bathroom batteries, the guts behind a stall bathroom that nobody really thinks is very sexy, although everybody has to go to the bathroom. So like a 2-stall, 5-stall, 7-stall. Let's see that assembly is that thing right there. Well, they take a placeholder and they put it there, and they then hand it to the general contractor who goes into their static, database on their desktop and figures out some assumptions that they add to that on their last job, cut and paste, whatever, get somebody to tell them what they think it is today versus yesterday. And then months later, they finally give it to the maker. And that maker doesn't have enough space to make that thing now because that guy made a 2.75 stall and gave him space enough for only a 1 stall. And really, they're asking for performance of a 5 stall. So he's like, what do I do? This is impossible. I give it to my fab shop and say, figure something out. And they do the best they can, who hands it back to the GC to see if it reconciles with what their original assumptions were, which it doesn't. And then back to the, architect to see if it reconciles with their, which it doesn't. We all know. It's like the worst game of telephone ever when you're a little kid and somebody whispers something in the beginning, except the information at the beginning was wrong from the start. The problem is, if it was one thing, it wouldn't be so bad. We're doing this about thousands of interdependent assemblies all the time. So what takes priority? Usually somebody gets paid on something and they want to get paid faster. So we go, let's just do the steel first, and then everything will have to be around the steel. Well, we all know that kind of screws up some of the things we want to make in factories, but people get paid on steel, and that's long lead. So let's just set that in place. Or my dad used to say, let's just move some dirt so we can get paid. Like, that's not the way we should be prioritizing. Now, by the way, I showed you that for an MEP subcontractor. If I showed you that for a building product manufacturer, I'd have to add another layer of subs and another layer of distributors, and then my God, it's like the worst game ever. And they don't even aggregate what they make into the best assemblies because they're getting disparate information that is fragmented even further downstream. And so I don't know if you watched Autodesk University. I hope you did, because it was free and there's lots of cool learning. But on day 2, they talked about manufacturing form design, Andrew Anagnos, and he said, so much of our uncertainty that plagues us is going to be solved by bringing manufacturing to the front phases of designing a building. This is Autodesk saying you got to bring manufacturing up front in front of our, amazing design tools. And he showed a 1-for-1 mapping scenario of Inventor to Revit. What does that mean? You could change that thing in Revit. It would update your thing in Inventor 1-for-1. We have to go further. We need one-to-many mapping. That's the vision. That's where we're all going to move towards. We need. That's a bridge right there. That one bridge, when they changed it, updated in Inventor. We need to inform the design originally with that red placeholder bridge with anything that can be tweaked and pulled and stretched longer, shorter, taller, so that you can have one model with many instances of what's manufacturable. That's one-to-many mapping. We have to move to one-to-many mapping, right, and make it accessible. So what do I call that value proposition? Manufacturing informed design. But it's not, you can't do it by itself. No product is going to solve that. As you know, that's why I get plenty of people that challenge me in questions and say, like, architects are never going to do that. I go, what? They won't click on their cloud to pick the right piece instead of the desktop for the wrong piece? Of course they will, if you let them work within their tools. But that's why we have to advocate for business change. We have to talk about how it changes people's behavior. And so that's why we've started a group here through our manufacturing consulting group and with outside manufacturing and other AEC consultants called Convergence Consulting. where these things cross over the silos. That's super important so that everybody could actually focus on what they want to do. I don't know any architect that decided to be an architect because they want to be a database manager. Nobody wanted to do that. And certainly our craftsmen, they can't make things without the use of technology anymore if they want to survive for scale. Right? We need to really understand how we can't just keep saying we need to be more like manufacturers and then never talk to a manufacturer to figure out what that means. Right? We can't do that because all we keep doing is making these snowflakes. And an example of that is that there is a difference between prefabrication, I believe downstream, many snowflakes, and upstream productization. I always say this example. No architect wakes up in the morning and decides to design a 217.5 generator because they want to. No, it's a 200 or 250. They design around it because that thing is productized, right? It's a product. They know the scalable capacities, the inputs, outputs, the lead times, the costs. But somehow in prefab, we decided because we're not manufacturers there, we're just like redesign everything and give them not enough space or make them come up. And they don't even know how to tell us how their products work because we've made them do a million different iterations. So we have to move away from prefabrication up through products to products, which means you have to stop making things for the first time every time. And you have to define those things so you can manage those, not just the physicality of that workflow, but the piece part, but also the workflow that is attached to it. So that skid lives with some data that's extensible to many things, sustainability, manufacturability, cost, whatever, and that you also know how it travels across the workflow with what software and behaviors and tools and stakeholders touch it in what way. Right? We haven't gotten there yet. That's called defining and managing and then optimizing these things like the framework. And why now? We know this is happening. By the way, I borrowed this from GSK, who spoke at the Advancing Prefab show that's coming up again in April. If you don't think productization is happening, you just have to look at their presentation right there. By the way, we had all these C-suite executives. We asked them, how many of you, now that we define convergence, would say you're a convergence customer? 82% of them said they would define their businesses as convergence customers. And 79% said they were on a journey for productization. Funny enough, even though we all talk about manufacturing, less than 1% of them knew that Autodesk had manufacturing software and tools, and that they connect to the tools they already buy in design and construction in our Autodesk Construction Cloud. We need that connected workflow. We need to transform our businesses. It cannot be one product to rule them all. It needs to be a connectivity of these workflows, many different ones for each one of these piece parts that are going to be different, whether it's precast to a heavy MEP to something else. They're not all, you can't democratize all these workflows into one. They're going to need different tools, different calculations, different software. So I believe, have been focusing on the makers, these people that are subs coming up to be more manufacturers and building product manufacturers making larger and larger aggregated assemblies. They are the generators of data. You have the consumers of data, right? So I call them convergence AEC companies. So people that want to consume and use that data to aggregate them, to use generative tools to understand how they want to build these buildings with things that are made. And then you have serial owners, usually the owners of that data, that want to understand that they can reuse that data for many different things. And we're solving lots of their problems with manufacturing informed design at the core. There's other problems and things that need to be solved for, but they all need this manufacturing informed design at their center, right? And so the value proposition of that is that here's where I like to say you sort of have to rearrange the chess pieces. For those of you who know that I love chess and that you can't just use the pieces as is. It doesn't start with a function of Revit where we know that you can't actually define manufactured things and stop them from being stretched or made bigger or smaller or made into something unmanufacturable. You need a manufacturing software to do that first, so you have rules and constraints like Inventor or Fusion or one of the other competitive products that actually defines it down to the fastener level detail. Now, you want that information to then be consumed by something like Revit or AutoCAD so that you can actually utilize it and have that architect work within their core talents and tools, making things larger, smaller, higher, tall, but only within the manufacturing constraints that were defined by the maker. Let them do what their customizations, but only what they are allowed to. That's still manufacturable until it says move to the next product line. You can't make it that big, right? I'm making these kind of simple. And that needs to inform design so that we can inform the other future workflows, right? In Assemble. So we can have automated workflows doing many different things, whether it's submittals and RFIs or talking right to the machines, but it needs to start with that manufacturing information consumed by the tools of design, pushing back out on Forge. In this case, like the data has to travel across Forge. It doesn't go product to product to product to product. It mostly goes to Forge and back through Forge and the cloud and back and forth amongst these tools. And then you should imagine an ecosystem of other tools that make different capabilities possible that some you've seen today in our partners, right? And so it's not just about, we said, the tools, it's about advocating for change. That's why you guys see me everywhere all the time. It's about evangelism and advocacy, not just talking at people. I always say these are not my opinions that I'm saying. These are my aggregated thoughts and feelings and voices of other customers I work with now around the world that are telling me these things that we are partnering with that want to change their business. And so we can influence the strategy of the products and the workflows that are happening today. That's really important. And also this convergence consulting notion is really important, because I just said there's going to be like building a digital book and a digital library. There'll be thousands of different workflows, right? And the first one that I'm seeing a lot of opportunity around is these guys that want to make things. And so you want to be manufacturers. Well, you should probably go to manufacturers to learn how to be manufacturers, right? Like you want to use those tools. And again, I told you, lots of people don't realize that we have those capabilities, and you want to make sure those capabilities, you can't just put yourself on an island and buy a great manufacturing tool and then have nothing be able to consume it or read it or use it. That's the danger. Most of us don't need something that builds a rocket ship these days. We just need some great manufacturing tools to define some rules and constraints that can be consumed by the design software that we all are used to, whatever it is that you're used to using, and push it back out to the cloud so that you can track things like, in our case, the Autodesk Construction Cloud, because you want to expand these capabilities of the platform and use other people's tools in places where there are gaps, because there's going to be gaps in lots of these workflows. And so, by the way, if you think about that transformation, it's going to be a lot on the manufacturing informed design, but then it's going to be a lot on the make. Once you're making similar things. I know my friends, that have, I don't know, $20 billion of work out there in the government in the UK. It's like you want people to invest in their manufacturing facilities. At the same time, you can't tell them that you're just going to bid out all the work. Nobody wants to do that. Like there's a lot of money people need to invest if they actually want to become real manufacturers. But there's a lot of opportunity in that manufacturing space. While the design tools have continued to evolve for the core modeling and documentation, there's a lot of technology, even at Autodesk, that supports advanced and emerging manufacturing processes. That's what's going to revolutionize us as manufacturers. You can only do that if manufacturing informed design exists. And you want to connect that through the design process, through the make process, right? So you can do next generation methods like generative design, as we said, and more IC. So back to my framework for a second. Those first concrete steps of action you want to take, I believe, begin with understanding your technology stack and your culture. But productization is really the next step, and that you don't do in the tools that don't allow for manufacturability. You want to use the right tools with the right skill set, and you want everyone to work within their core capabilities and the core tools that they know how to use. So that's my presentation today. I know it was a little fast. I like to say questions and challenges, not just questions. How's that?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh my God, a miracle. This happened twice today. So, anyone got any questions for Amy? Anyone here already making things like fabricating? If you say me, I'll speak it out.
What does he think about the definition of the product? Because he kept using the word product
Yeah.
and productization. So I believe in terms of the industrialization,
Yep.
that probably we need to be more progressive about how to define product.
Okay, yeah, it's about the definition of the word product and using productization. I think probably there is a negative connotation with productization in my head. I don't really know why, but in terms of should
What?
we be why? Why do I think productization? Because it just sounds like it's consumerism and you're just going to make a shitload of something that really we probably shouldn't be doing at this period of time. But I know in your context, you're talking about, so from my understanding of Amy's talks, productization is have something in Revit and the equivalent in Inventor, so that when you start modeling and designing in it, you've already got the fabrication covered. So you don't end up...
Little bit.
Something like that?
Let me back up a little for you.
Okay.
Let me back up a little for you. Productization is not a dirty word. First of all, it's not going to happen overnight. The productization is going to exist to enable and free architects to work on bespoke areas of the building that are not yet productized or never will be productized. But I don't know one architect in the world that wants to draw fire stairs or wants to draw things above the ceiling, behind the walls, or underground, or things that are just performance-based that aren't aesthetically affecting the look and feel of what the building is. That's where we're going to start on productization. You'll be enabled to be freed up by many of those things that you don't know how to draw and don't want to draw and that are happening downstream, where the money of these buildings is actually getting lost. And I think you'll be freed up to do a lot more things about it. the Inventor to Revit connectivity is that things need to start as being products and defined in something like Inventor or Fusion, using something like iLogic, where there's rules and constraints. It then needs to go and be consumed by Revit, but I still want somebody in Revit to be able to adjust it to what they need and then but not outside of the manufacturability. That's the problem. If you make something in Revit and adjust it in Revit, you have no idea if that thing can still be made the way in which you adjusted it. There's no real-time connection either to whether or not that company still exists or is in business or even makes that thing anymore, or if it's even to code anymore. So we have to have some real-time connection, and that connection to actual manufacturability.
Because the thing that's interesting for Autodesk is you've got Inventor and you've got Fusion, and then on the other side you've got Revit. Now, there is a flow between the two to ultimately produce the building and do whatever, but you are asking people to exist in two worlds with some crossover of this productization, these elements which are mutually, not exclusive, mutually mutual between what you've defined in Revit and what you've defined in Inventor. But
not really. Not really.
Let me just say that there are some people here who are already using Inventor as a start point and avoiding the whole Revit thing straight off the bat because they want to go to one-to-one immediately.
Well, you want to go to one-to-many at the end, right? Like, you don't want to have a model for every single instance of every single scalable piece and part. You want one model for anything that then can be scaled off that model. It's like, we don't want just a 200 model and a 250 model and a 300 model. We have the ability with parametric and rules and constraints to say, yeah, you actually could design a 217.5 if that's makeable. Now, I'm not asking architects to do anything in Inventor, by the way. Most manufacturers work in manufacturing tools already. I'm asking the makers, not the architects, the people that make things, to start defining what they do in a different type of software. And I'm asking the Revit users to continue to use Revit to consume that data and make those adjustments inside the tool they already know. Now, yes, you can certainly design lots of things depending on the size and scale and the capability of what you want to do with the tools in anything and start and end there. But I don't know if that at the moment, since most things are not completely productized down to the level of detail in every part of this building that we all want for everything we do, I think you have to have, a consumption model of the data from one to the other. And sure, one day, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. But I mean, it depends who you are and what the goals of your business are.
Someone else put their hand up. Oh, I'm going to go back to that. I'm about to translate for a Scottish accent.
Oh, boy.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I wonder if you have some either, or maybe both, good examples from construction that are adopting manufacturing processes, and or I wonder maybe more likely those coming from out with construction, either from manufacturing or elsewhere, who are going to rock up and disrupt using manufacturing and DFMA, etc., as an approach.
I have a lot of makers right now using manufacturing tools like Inventor with iLogic, productizing things. They're all over the world. There are guys and gals not making things in Revit anymore to inform architects that are utilizing Inventor to inform not just the design, but then to speak to their manufacturing facilities where they're making assemblies, multi-trade and otherwise. That's happening everywhere. That's not like, I don't need to show you a innovative case study of that. I mean, I guess I would say they're innovative, but it's not like there's only one. You know what I mean? And by the way, in our convergence consulting group, we're working on many of those at the moment, handfuls of those right now where those companies are makers. And by the way, remember, those AEC makers, actually using the tool is not the hard part. They've never had to productize scalable capacities, right? You've always said, give me a space and I'll make it into something. It's like, no, tell us what you make and we'll insert it into the drawings. They struggle a little bit with that side, not the tech. The guys from the building product manufacturers, they don't struggle with either of those two things. What they struggle with is the fact that we need to utilize that consumption model to make sure that they can still make it, and they want to aggregate larger and larger assemblies, more of their assemblies into one thing. So what they're learning is if, in one case, I have a company that makes, I don't know, let's say balconies, and they make the glass and the steel and they're realizing, wait a minute, I could just make a balcony assembly and I could just sell that instead of all the pieces and parts that never end up on a job together, right? It's like they're going to just move into larger assemblies. As long as they're discoverable, that's their challenge. They've got to, I believe at Autodesk, it's part of our role to make sure that we create an environment in the future where these assemblies are discoverable by architects so that you don't click on your desktop, that you click somewhere in the cloud to find them. That's all I'm asking architects to change their behavior. They just click on something that's wrong. I'd like them to click somewhere and pull the right information. And I think they'll get addicted when they get the right information, when they're able to use things like generative design, because you can't do that unless things are productized. You can't actually attach IoT sensors to large chunks of the building past just the equipment level. Look, people don't build with pumps anymore. They use pump skids for data centers. If your digital twin doesn't enable like a pump skid, like the thought of people building into multi-trade assemblies, what is it doing? You know, like then you're just getting cool as-built at the end. But we want to not just track the efficiency of it when it operates, but you want to use that IoT sensor to understand, like we have technology today with our partners that exists of where is it in the making right now, and when did it get shipped, and where is it going, and did it show up on site? Now how is it operating, so that the next 10 data centers I can make a better choice on what products to use, because I have data about it, not just like, hey, go get the local guy to come up here and tell me what he can make. We need data. People have large portfolios, these large serial owners, and they need data to make better choices. You can't be predictive or have any analytics. It's almost like productization puts an artificial reef down in an ocean, right? And ecosystems build themselves around that because you finally have something solid to touch upon. And I believe, for me, it's the chassis of that assembly, the product itself. And those products are evolving to what they'll be, but you can't really track data unless you have something to attach it to.
Do you think this is quite a hard thing to push when you're really relying on existing manufacturers to adopt this methodology of almost creating kind of construction BIM objects, or you're asking individual companies to adopt this mentality as opposed to, because we've been through this before in the BIM world, which you kind of...
That's the wrong tool.
Well, it's like
right?
people download stuff that are BIM objects that are created online, and you can end up with all manner of shit, just destroying your model or killing your performance.
So again, it's like, why didn't it work before? In my opinion, timing and trying to make a duck into a dog. Listen, Phil Bernstein, my friend, like my cohort, like he had BIM right, except for I believe the eye has to be evolved to be intelligent. You can model anything. By the way, we can't have these models being unbelievably heavy. It just doesn't work. I want that object to act like it acts, so you can still pull it, stretch it, make it taller. But it's the recipe for it. You don't actually have to have the cake in your thing. You just know how it behaves. I have a level of abstraction that acts the way it needs to without pulling down the entire model. Again, I believe timing was part of that issue and trying to make a duck a dog. Like, you ask architects, what tools should we do it in? They're going to say theirs. It just doesn't do what you want it to do. It will never do those things. Like, you have to use the right tool for the right thing.
But is Autodesk going to have its own library of qualified, you're the kind of police making sure that the models aren't too big, that there is some element of quality to what people can download, because that's important. If you're bringing things into your design environment, you need to make sure that they are not, crappy.
I'll say it differently. I think there needs, again, this is my future vision, safe harbor, like all that. You need to have a data schema, right? Like, you can't put things on Amazon.com as a supplier without it meeting some data schema so people can buy it, see it, understand it, know its ratings. Like, there is a data schema when you're posting anything in any world, like, to make sure it's consumable. I believe that's part of what we should enable at Autodesk, and what I think the future enables. I don't think we set the standards of like what a rack or a riser. That's not. Somebody asked me that last week in the Design Build Institute. I believe that's, look, people productize lots of things, and that's up to the market to decide. I think the data schema of how it actually gets consumed is definitely on the platform that is utilizing it and using that data to consume it across Forge. Like, obviously it has to have rules and constraints, and we want it to travel across Forge so it can be consumed by not just our software, but any Forge partner. And so yes, data schema, yes. By the way, I always say you can productize a lot of things, which happens around the world. I'm into fashion. Lots of ugly dresses still stay on the rack. I don't tell them how to make dresses, but they should know because no one buys it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but I think here we have in the UK, we do like standards. We like to ignore them and we like to argue about them, but we like standards. So I kind of destroyed my country,
But no. But by the way, I think we have to. I just was in a working session for your country and what they're doing in the $19 billion worth of work, right, for what they're creating platforms for. What does standard actually mean? It can't mean you can only use this one thing. It looks exactly like this. it shouldn't be that. It should be that it has some performance standards, some guiding principles of what that thing is, so that you could use any of these products and adjust them that would fit that particular data schema, that particular use case, right? Because if you don't do that, you're basically squelching any and all innovation of any product that might be new or make it a different way. Sure, you could have like a guiding principle is like, I don't want hot work in this thing. That's fine. But you can't say the attachment must be this and that and this and how do you know that's the right one? Who determined that? Like, we all want to make sure that we understand how these things work with their adjacencies. And if the data explains that and you can import that data and then it's obvious, great. And so the data schema allows you not to have, again, I think standards, I think one-for-one mapping, and that's not enough for architects. By the way, I'm on the architect's side. I'm not I am like, you should be like loving every architect should love me. I feel like make their job so much easier. And by the way, they're gonna work within their own tool to make their own adjustments. That's what they want to do. We don't want them to have to learn new tools or new things and new ways. Like, I'm just asking them to make adjustments and that something will stop them from making it unmanufacturable. Because that doesn't happen now, right? Like, you just make it unmanufacturable and you kick the can down the road. Not on purpose. I don't think on purpose.
No.
I think.
Any more questions? Oh, I'm going. Oh, get around.
This is I wish I was there. It'd be the most exercise I'm getting during COVID.
This is part of my.
I'm basically veal.
Anti-COVID
I'm like
diet.
veal.
So just one thing about responsibility for me, I feel like, so from architectural side, I feel like BIM came to that level where, you know, we all now feeling we need to put more data, we'll be more responsible basically at technical stage, and then handover goes to contractors. So don't you think that's going to make even more responsibility for designers, architects? So that's one question.
Not
and I'll have
really.
another.
Like, how responsible are you for the generator that's manufactured? Because you know exactly what it is, and there's a company that provided it and had a scalable capacity for it. Like, we act like we don't have this stuff happening now. You have this exact situation right now with manufactured products that you implement into your designs. You're not freaking out about your generator. Like, I just used that as an example, but there's plenty of other things I could say. Why would you freak out about your rack and riser now that it acts and behaves and has the same, you know, exact same way of working as that generator that you could care less about, but for me having this conversation, right? It's like, let's pretend that we don't really actually do these things we do every day. You do that every day. Nobody cares. Like, it happens every day, and we know how to work with those things. There's plenty of manufactured items that, by the way, you should be asking me a different question. What happens when you're so scared of this that somebody productizes all of the building and they don't need you anymore because you were unable to like understand how to use these products and do test fits and understand site adaptation and work on and enable this and embrace it so that you could actually use it to your advantage and stand on the shoulders of it to create a better design? That's what you should be asking me. You should be scared that somebody else is thinking about that while somebody else thinks about, like, what if I'm forced to use a riser? Who cares? Like, your business is out at that point. Somebody doesn't care as much. They're coming up with a better way to work.
Thank you, Amy, for that bombshell. So we were out of time, but I'd like to thank you for taking the time today. And I know that you had a massive Comcast outage, which meant we didn't know if we were going to get you or not. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, and I'm open to talking to anybody at any time. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or any of the social media platforms at Queen of Prefab.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amy. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.